Welcome into Shot and Vip, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this college football season. I'm Taylor Vippolis hosting this, and as always, I'm joined by my former teammate, former Carolina linebacker, overall great guy. Love to see him on Sundays, especially this Sunday in particular, with Carolina coming off a win against Wake Forest from Kenan Stadium. Carolina wins 31-24 against the Demon Deacons. Shot, we said it last week. Don't let this Carolina team get hot, and they keep the momentum rolling. What were your opening thoughts from this game against Wake Forest?
So I'm reporting live from Buffalo, New York. I wanted to give two special Tar Heels a shout out. I'm up in Buffalo, obviously watching later today. I'm going to go see the Bills Chiefs, and we got two former Tar Heel greats, Matt Collins and Mitch Trubisky on the Bills. So I'm coming to see those guys and hopefully celebrate a Bills win and jump through a table at the tailgate. So
Wow, you will go through a table?
uh, I got plans to do it. So hopefully I end up on Twitter and go viral later today. So hopefully all the Tar Heel fans can see me do that. But back to Carolina. Al Davis said it best: just win, baby. Coming off a 4-game losing streak and now to win 4 in a row. We've said it the last couple of weeks, but keep giving this team credit for staying focused and not getting down on themselves and finding a way to win these games. Because I think after the 4-game losing streak, everyone that listens to this pod, everyone that's a fan was had very low expectations for the last half of the year. So, congrats to the team for achieving bowl eligibility after things look very bleak. And, that's 6 straight years of bowl games for our Tar Heels. Mac 2.0, he's 6 for 6 in bowl games. And I know that's not, we're looking for more than bowl games, but hey, minimum we're winning 6 games a year. And, that's something to be said for the consistency of our program. The last 3 years we played Wake Forest, it's been a shootout. It's been a basketball game, basketball type scores. Think back to the Sam Howell games where both teams are in the 50s, and then Drake May plays them a couple years ago, and it's another shootout game. So, I mean, good for us for the under bettors in this game for cashing in the win if they bet the under of this game. So, it was a little sloppy at times, but I never really felt like Wake had a chance. They just didn't have enough firepower to get it done. 2 times in the fourth quarter, Wake got the ball down a possession. And I felt very confident in our defense that there was no way that they were going to go down and tie the game. Obviously we get that turnover late in the fourth and then we punch in with Hampton to go up 2 scores with 2 minutes to go in the game. And, at that point you feel very good. So, kind of an ugly game at times. A couple things that I noticed. One, I want to give a shout out to our special teams and Coach Brown for calling a fake punt. Or early in the first half or maybe second quarter, we call a fake punt, and I think we should have fakes on special teams dialed up every game and run them more often. I love the aggressive nature. I don't think we end up scoring on that drive, but I love the fake punt call because it obviously worked. 10 penalties in the game. That's way too many. We had some careless PI calls, defensive holdings. I think Willie Lampkin had 2 holding calls. J.J. Jones had a false start. It was just stuff that from some veteran guys that shouldn't happen. But Wake Forest had a lot of penalties, obviously, too. So just kind of a sloppy game in that regard. Defensively, I thought our D-line played pretty well. Travis Shaw had his best game as a Tar Heel, and we'll get more into that later. But defensively, we tackled well. I think our biggest culprit of inconsistent tackler is Stick Lane. You see him with some big devastating hits, but you also see some where he's just putting his head down and diving at ankles and not getting anywhere near the ball carrier. So, but for the most part, we tackled well. Caleb Koss had some good tackles. Power is as good a tackler as we have. D linemen were getting off blocks and making plays on the running back, and for the most part, keeping the quarterback in the pocket. They scrambled a little bit, but all in all, good game. Wake hasn't had a great season. Obviously, they're 4-6 now, and but hey, we'll take a win because Dave Clawson is a good ball coach, and we haven't played Wake Forest great over the last 3 years. Obviously, we've beaten them the last three times we played them prior to this game, but it's just been a very tight game. So regardless who's on the roster, they're gonna play us close. So yeah, four game win streak, and we're here to celebrate it.
Yeah, and during this win streak, you've mentioned how tackling has kind of been one of the things that you could point at defensively for why there's been such an improvement on that side of the ball. I think they've before this game they've had 2 straight weeks of 5 or fewer missed tackles. This past game against Wake Forest, they only have 3 missed tackles. 2 of them
Stick
you
lane.
mentioned two of them were stick lane. So this defense right now is playing really fundamentally sound football. And then the other point that I wanted to mention, I saw this tweet from Greg Barnes. Let me just preface this. I love Greg. I absolutely love Greg Barnes. I don't think there's somebody better for breaking down Carolina football than the people that we have at Inside Carolina, whether it's Greg or whether it's Jason Staples.
Or
us, yes. This tweet was from Greg 1 minute after the game went final. Wake Forest has played 2 legitimate top 25 opponents this season and was not competitive in either game, losing 40-6 to Ole Miss and 49-14 to Clemson, both at home. Kudos to UNC for securing this win in the final minutes, but don't read more into it than what it is. My only question is, who's reading more into it?
Not me.
I was wondering when I saw that tweet, I was wondering if he was seeing like people saying like Carolina's like saved their season or Carolina's going to contend for something that's out of the window. But I think for the most part, everybody's kind of adjusted their expectations for this team. And when they get to a point in the season where I think they were when the season was at its worst after the Georgia Tech loss, where Carolina is 3-4, and it felt like it was a season that was spiraling out of control. I don't think anybody's saying that all of a sudden this North Carolina team is this top 25 caliber team, but at the very least, you're seeing a team that can play complementary football on both sides of the ball, that is playing sound football, that they're not beating themselves like you can make the argument in the James Madison or the Duke game or the Pitt game or the Georgia Tech game, where the past 3 games, UVA, Florida State, Wake Forest, none of those teams are really anything to write home about. But this North Carolina team has been finding ways to win. And that's a lot more than you could say from that James Madison game or from the Duke game. And it's been a fun team to watch, where when you go into a game, and obviously the expectations are a lot less than when Carolina started the season, and you're like, maybe they could do something. But when you go into a game and you're like, at the very least, my team is going to play sound football, that feels like a win right now in this era of college football, especially with your third string quarterback in Jacoby Criswell. But I think another reason why Carolina fans feel good about this team, it starts and stops with their running back, Omar Hampton. 35 carries, 244 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. He averaged 7 yards a carry, also added in 16 yards receiving. We kind of talked about in previous podcasts with Omar Hampton the like Sam Howell and Drake May fatigue. But when you have a running back like Hampton rush for 244 yards against a Wake Forest defense that knows, hey, when 28's in the game, 28's going to get the ball. And seeing a defense commit as many guys as Wake Forest was doing to try to slow him down and still really not have a ton of answers for him, how do you put into words what Omar Hampton did on Saturday?
I mean, he was incredible once again. It's amazing to me that I can have a 5-minute opening statement and not mention Hampton's name. You know, like you said, we could talk about him for 90% of this podcast, but obviously I knew we were going to talk about him later. But I mean, he's the heartbeat, he's the pulse, he's everything for our football team. And honestly, we didn't run him or give him the ball enough. He could have had 5 to 7 more touches in this game. And like the opening or first quarter, we get down to we have first and goal from the 7. We run him on first down, and he gets second and goal from the 3-yard line, and then we take 2 straight sacks to knock ourselves out of field goal or touchdown and miss a field goal. Don't get bored giving Hampton the ball in any way you can. But every time he touched the ball, he just inflicted pain on the Wake Forest defense. Whether it was in the pass game, inside runs, outside runs, he was a demon. And no pun intended, playing the Demon Deacons, he was a demon all game, and he's established himself as a top 2 or 3 all time Carolina back. I saw some stats that he has a chance to break the single season rushing record. He should be a first team All American. The way I look at it, him and the kid from Boise State. But what a finishing touchdown to end the game. Hurdles the line, has 2 linebackers there to stick him while he's in the air before he even lands. They make contact. He keeps his balance, just unbelievable contact balance, and then drives his legs 4 more yards and gets in the end zone to, put our team up 2 scores with, 2 minutes to go. I cannot say enough good things about that kid, just like everybody. But we can't get bored giving him the ball. And, each game here on out, he should have minimum 30 touches. And what did he finish up with? He had 33 rushes maybe.
He had 35 rushes.
35 rushes and then
5 catches.
And 5 catches. So he did touch the ball 40 times, but if those are rookie numbers, we can get those up a little bit. Just because anytime he gets the ball in his hands, he does something productive with the ball. The thing I didn't like about our red zone offense, I hate when we. In the normal bulk of the field, from the 20 to the 20, we do a good job of spreading out the offense and allowing Hampton to find run lanes because he's got great vision. Obviously, his cutting ability, his ability to get north-south on even a wide zone, stick his foot in the ground, get north-south, and get skinny through the hole. I hate when we get everyone congested in there because it allows for a loose defender to slip in and clip him by his feet. So, maybe we can tighten up our, red zone rushing attack a little bit. But look, he is one of a kind, and he will probably play, 2 more games in the Carolina Blues. So I expect him to go for 150 minimum in both of those games, and finish as the all-time single season leading rusher because he is on a tear right now. Watching him versus Florida State, watching him versus Wake. He's just a man on a mission, man possessed, and we're so happy to have him on our team. He's a great representative of North Carolina.
Yeah, it's really impressive with how much attention a team like Wake Forest is putting on him and sending so many guys in the box and trying to run commit. And then you look at the final numbers and he rushes for 244 rushing yards on 7 yards a carry without really having too much of a balance on offense. Like if he had a Drake May or if he had a Sam Howell, and it's not a knock on Jacoby Criswell, but Jacoby Criswell is not an NFL caliber quarterback right now in comparison to a Sam Howell and Drake May, and knowing what defenses are prioritizing on their scouting report. But I have a few stats from UNC just because sometimes you just run out of words for how good Omar and Hampton is. So Hampton's 35 rushing touchdowns are tied for 3rd in UNC history with Marquise Williams. Hampton has 38 career touchdowns, tied for 4th all-time at UNC with Kelvin Bryant and Marquise Williams. Hampton has 1422 rushing yards this season, which is 4th most in a season by a Tar Heel. Hampton has rushed for at least 100 yards in 8 consecutive games, which is the UNC record for most consecutive games with at least 100 rushing yards. Don McCauley did it in 8, but his 8th was the Peach Bowl. Hampton is the 3rd Tar Heel to have 3 games with at least 200 rushing yards in his career, tying the most in school history. Mike Voigt and Amos Lawrence also had 3. His 35 carries was a career high, the most carries by a Tar Heel since Ryan Houston had 37 against Duke. Hampton's 244-yard performance tied for 11th all-time in UNC history with Ronnie McGill, who had 244, also against Wake Forest, but in 2003. I was a little surprised. I didn't think Jacoby Criswell had the game that we've kind of expected him to have the past 2 weeks, especially with the attention that Wake Forest had on somebody like Omar and Hampton. What did you see from Criswell? Because I thought he had a couple of uncharacteristic plays for him. One, the fumble that kind of got Wake back into it, and also the backward pass that got tipped, but it looked like a forward pass, but I don't really know what happened there.
He didn't play his best game, but he didn't play his worst. He had, the one turnover where I think the ball kind of clipped Hampton's elbow or something, and it kind of squirted out of his hands. That's not a great play, but it's kind of on him and Hampton. The spacing just wasn't right. To be honest, he looked the most comfortable he looked in the game was the 2-minute drive before the half, because we knew we weren't going to really run the ball, and we literally just got in 10, 11 personnel sets with everyone removed from the core, and he was back there throwing 7-on-7, and that's when he looked the best in the entire game. He was throwing on rhythm. He had some good downfield throws. He was accurate. His timing was good. He didn't do much to look. He had a great rushing touchdown. That rushing touchdown where he dove in the end zone was a great play. Yeah, that looked like Sam or Drake back there. That was a great play. J.J. Jones had a big drop on third down, in the fourth quarter on UNC's sideline. And so his numbers weren't 14 to 22, 132 yards and 1 touchdown, no picks. He had 1 turnover worthy throw to one of the Wake defenders that they kind of dropped, but it wasn't his best game. It was just kind of middle of the pack. But like I said, when he was back there throwing the ball on time, on rhythm, he throws a great ball. There was a couple of passes in the second half where Wake got some pressure on him. He wasn't able to really set his feet and drive the ball off his back foot, and threw a couple low in the dirt. But all in all, he still manages the game really well. He's looking comfortable. Like he looks like a starting quarterback in the ACC right now. So I think he'll learn from this. And honestly, our game plan going into it was run the ball. In the first half, I think we ran the ball, and 90% of the snaps we had possession. So he wasn't asked to do much in this game. And to be honest, like our skill receivers on the outside, our tight ends and receivers, we've talked about it in the past, that they aren't getting the most separation. I would take Donovan Green over any receiver we have. J.J. Jones made a nice catch in the back of the end zone for a touchdown, but he's not as consistent or as explosive or as highlight reel type play as a lot of the guys we're facing. So Jacoby doesn't have the weapons that we're used to on the outside that UNC has had in the past. So it's kind of a give and take there. And obviously he took a couple sacks. Part of it's on him. Part of it's on our offensive line, especially at the tackle position, not being able to handle a speed rush. So not a terrible game, but obviously not his best. But enough to get the job done.
I think that point that you ended with is the difference between somebody like Jacoby Criswell and the first 2 quarterbacks that we saw to start the year, Max Johnson and Connor Harrell, where the Wake Forest game, you're watching it and you're like, yeah, something kind of feels off with Jacoby Criswell, but he has the talent to get you over the finish line, and he has the talent to win games with his arms, where early in the season you're watching and you're like trying to figure out where Carolina is going to get enough plays to get over the finish line. Jacoby Criswell, at the very least, if a game like Wake Forest is his floor, you're going to be a successful team in the ACC with a lot of these teams that you're going to go up against. And yeah, I think the only knock that I kind of had with the red zone play call, and Carolina took 5 sacks, and I think Wake Forest only came into that game with a pretty low amount of sacks, so they were getting a lot of pressure. When you have 2nd and 3, I personally, from the goal line, if I'm a Carolina fan, I could live with, hey, we get stopped on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th down, giving the ball to Omar and Hampton 3 times. It's when you kind of, you start doing the play action and you're running the crossing routes. And the crossing routes, it looked like those were going to be there if Criswell had enough time. But again, I think that kind of goes back to your point of getting cute when you have such a stud running back in Omar and Hampton. But let's take a quick break so I can remind everybody about our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. If you're going to be in Chapel Hill, you could visit them on Franklin Street. And if not, no worries. You could go online to johnnytshirt.com. They have everything that the Carolina fan could possibly want. The hats, the T-shirts, the jerseys, you name it. They've got it. They've always got great sales going on. Great people, great customer service. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. Schott, going to the defense, you mentioned him in your opening takeaways. Power Echols. I want to start with Power Echols. He graded out 91.6 on Pro Football Focus, the highest grade he's ever had against a Power 4 opponent. He has the pick 6. What does Power do for this defense, especially in the middle of it, kind of being the vocal guy? I'm assuming he's the one with the green helmet sticker.
I think he had it early in the year, and they may have switched it to Campbell. I think they've kind of gone back and forth just because he's playing more of the outside position that travels. When the formation is flexed, he's following the tight end. So I think they've had it with Campbell a little bit the last couple of games just because he's in the center.
Yeah.
So he's able to communicate with the line. But I don't know specifically this game. But to be honest, he's kind of been overshined by Campbell this year, and just in terms of just raw stats. Campbell's had 4 or 5 sacks, had kind of more splash plays in terms of getting his hands on the ball, PBUs, TFLs, things like that. But that's just the nature of the position in Jeff Collins' defense. We're asking Power this year to step outside, and he's playing a lot more coverage. He's covering tight ends, and he's always been a great tackler. He's always been a great tackler. You never have to worry about his effort, his leadership. That's always been there, but he's turned into a great cover man. In the Florida State game, in the Duke game, he's running with tight ends, getting PBUs. He's playing very sticky coverage. And again, that pick 6 kind of was a turning point in our game. The offense was kind of stalling in the second half early, and we made a great play on defense. He was lined up over the center like we've talked about in previous weeks, and he kind of just drops out and spying the quarterback and reads his eyes, makes an athletic play, jumps up, grabs the ball, and no one can catch him from that point. So that was a huge turning point in the game. He's just been the model of consistency over the last 3 years. Kind of been overshadowed by Cedric Gray the last couple of years, and this year in terms of Campbell's stats. His stats aren't as great as Campbell's, but you know that he's the heartbeat of that defense, and he's the one, the emotional leader. So good to see him get. I think he's now got 4 interceptions in his career. So that's a great number from a middle linebacker for most of his career, now playing outside. So he's done a tremendous job, and he should be celebrated for his hard work, because he is as consistent and as hard of a practicer as I've ever seen from a college player. From the moment he stepped on campus as a true freshman, he practiced as hard as any player we had on the team. So, you never have to, worry about that guy's work ethic or his habits, because he is locked into football, 24/7.
Yeah, he had 8 tackles against Wake Forest, 0 missed tackles. Pro Football Focus grade of 91.6, a coverage grade of 91.9, so it was kind of doing it all. Another player who you love to see in the middle of this Carolina defense, Power Echols was the highest graded defensive player, the second highest graded defensive player, Travis Shaw. If Travis Shaw is making a play, Travis Shaw is going to be celebrating, and I think that's become a sight that Carolina fans love to see. When he has the ability to wreck a game and take over in the middle. What did you see from Shaw that led to him getting a Pro Football Focus grade of 82.0?
I mean, he had his best game as a Tar Heel. the talent has been there. Obviously, he was recruited by everyone in the country. His size is off the charts, but he's finally playing with better technique, better pad level, using his hands better. Uh, the things that stick out to me with Travis Shaw right now. So these two things do not take any physical skill. It's his energy and his effort and his body language. All three of those have elevated completely since the beginning of the year and even last year. You would see him, kind of get blocked and pushed around and then just kind of hang his head and not have an impact in the game. But his everything about him, obviously he's putting his size and skill and he's combining it with great pad level technique and he's making splash plays. He had two TFLs. He had a big pass breakup where he got his big paw up and knocked the ball down, maybe on a third down. And then obviously, recovering that fumble in the fourth quarter that ultimately helped us push the lead to 2 scores. So huge plays in the game. And obviously we see him celebrating because he's making plays when we're winning. So we need more of that from Shaw because he's got all the physical ability to be a high round draft pick, but now he's starting to put it together because he's got more ability probably than anyone on our defensive line, just God given ability, just with that size and speed and quickness and first step. So good for our defensive staff and Coach Ted and Collins for really tapping in and not giving up on the guy. Obviously, you never give up on a guy that's 6'5", 340 or whatever he is. So he's turned the corner for us, and he's helping everyone else on the D line, and they're helping him, play at a high level. The thing about the slow mesh offense is you really need your defensive line to control their gaps and not get bored because the mesh takes so long. So you're holding your block for so long, and sometimes defensive linemen jump out of gaps because they see the running back kind of, just steadily behind the offensive line, and he's literally waiting for a defensive lineman to jump gap. And the Wake does a good job of running that offense, but I think we bottled up the run, pretty well for the most part, and that was. Your defensive tackles, your nose tackle, and your 3 technique have to play very solid in there because most of the time they're getting double teamed by the center and the guard, and the guard or center and the guard on the other side on every play. So they really have to do a good job of it usually isn't a huge stat game for your defensive tackles because you're really just supposed to eat up blocks and let the linebackers and DNs flow to the ball. So I thought we played sticky coverage for the most part. Marcus Allen got beat a couple times. Huzzy did, but when we play Wake, they're on islands because if the safety's dropping down, the quarterbacks are reading it, and as soon as the safety triggers in the run game, now it's a one-on-one outside. So this is a tough game on our corners, and I thought they held their own for the most part. There was a couple of PIs and holdings that, but look at Wake's pass numbers, 240. In the past, we've seen 300 plus against us from Wake. Obviously, better quarterbacks in the past with Sam Hartman. But all around, pretty good game. I didn't like the late touchdown. I would like to see us finish that game. Finish out 31, 17. That's a more correct indication of not the dominance of the game, but I think we controlled the game offense and defensively for the most part. You look at the final score, 31-24, that score kind of isn't a direct indication of how the game went, in my opinion. So, but look, we'll take it. 4-game win streak, baby.
All right, let's take a quick break so I can remind everybody about our friends over at Congruity. Congruity is the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners, payroll, HR, and employee benefit needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR assessment by emailing Matt at Congruity. Email is matt@congruityhr.com. That email again is matt@congruityhr.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Everybody who's listening to this and everybody who listens to this podcast, loves this podcast, we're all in the trust tree here. How nervous were you during the onside kick?
I mean, honestly, I think more teams should do that. Like, just kick it directly at the front line and try to get a ricochet, and there's just a fight for the ball.
Yeah.
Who even recovered for it? Who
I
recovered
blacked
it for
out.
us? I don't. I mean, to be honest, I was never really nervous. But glad we recovered it, and obviously we get a face mask call to ice the game. But yeah, actually, you know what? With our special teams, how they've been over the last couple of years, maybe I did have a little nerves, but I felt good about it the whole time.
And when there was a scrum for the pile, normally you have like people on the outside giving a pretty good indication pretty early on. It
Yep.
felt like nobody on the outside had any idea where that ball was. And
No.
with the numbers, it felt like Wake had just as good a shot as Carolina to recover that. From your experience, what are those scrums like in there when a ball's on the ground and
I mean, both sides of the ball are reaching and grabbing and doing whatever they can to get the ball. It's the refs can't see a lot of what's going on underneath the pile just because there's so many bodies. So people may get grimy. There may be some eyes poked, some private parts touched. Like
all bets are off?
yeah, all bets are off. You're trying to get the ball, and so good for us for recovering that. That may be TMI. Saying that, but that's what goes on down there.
No, people like to know what's actually happening.
That's the truth. I mean, people are doing whatever they can to get the ball because with all those bodies on there, the camera's not going to catch for the most part what's going on. So it's scratching and calling and getting the ball by any means. So good for us for recovering that.
Carolina gets the win by any means necessary, pushing their win streak to 3. Carolina will be back in action this Saturday, noon kickoff from Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, taking on Boston College. Kickoff again at noon on the CW. Boston College making a quarterback switch this past week. They go to the, I believe, FIU transfer, Grayson James. So we'll see how that game goes. We'll break it down next week.
Recruited by a friend of the pod, Bryn Renner.
Wow.
So Bryn Renner recruited that guy to FIU, and
we might have to get Bryn on for a pregame scouting report.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, to be honest, early in the season when I watched the Castellanos kid, I didn't want to play him because UNC does not have a good track record with playing running quarterbacks. And obviously he hasn't, I guess, played up to the expectation he did early in the year over the last couple of weeks, and he gets benched and then transfers, which is another story in itself. But, after watching BC play Florida State early in the year when we didn't know FSU was garbage, I was like, oh, crap, BC is going to be a tough one. And Bill O'Brien's a great coach. He's been in the NFL for a long time and obviously was at Penn State. So, but I feel very confident about these last 2 games. If we continue to run the ball like we have, on our 4-game win streak, then, watch out, 8-4 and playing in a decent bowl game. We talked about that after the Virginia game. If they play like they do versus Virginia and they did again versus Florida State and they did against versus Wake, then we could look up and after, mid-season, we're like, this team is going to look drastically different next year, maybe a new coaching staff. The tides have turned a little bit, and we're 6-4 with 2 very, very winnable games, and it would be not a complete travesty or a complete letdown if we didn't win both, but I'm willing to say like we should take care of business in both of those games.
Yeah, I think the state game obviously a lot more importance, but again, Carolina with 2 winnable games to close out this season. They are, at the time of this recording, a 2-point favorite according to DraftKings Sportsbook against Boston College this weekend.
I'm taking it.
we will be back next week to break it all down. Shotman, appreciate the time as always, and appreciate everybody watching and listening.
Appreciate everybody. Let's go Bills. Mac Hollins touchdown.